Good morning, everyone, on this Sunday, October 17th. Today, I have someone that's special that I'm interviewing that's outside the usual people that I interview, because normally I talk to others about their work. And this time it's a special type of interview because I have with me an actress by the name of Rabbani Kaur. Is that correct?
Yeah,
or did I mess it up?
yes.
Okay. Well, I'm going to give them a little bit background on how we met. And so you study with Scott David, who is an actor's coach and also a casting director. And he was interested to help me find some actors for Pomegranate, and I think he has you in mind, and I can see why, having now met you. So what happened is that he ended up really enjoying the script when he read Pomegranate, and then he shared it with the class and I think that he asked you guys to do a report, or you ended up writing a report, a coverage about it.
Yes.
Yes, it was a very extensive, very lovely report. I could see the amount of work that you put into it, and it really touched me, because when he sent it to me, I was in the midst of I think pre-production, and really I was going crazy trying to put everything together. And when I read the report, it meant so much to me, especially at that time, and it reminded me the importance of the story, why I put the story together, and what it was going to mean once it was on the screen. So I asked if I could invite you to come, and I'm very thankful that you made the time to come and join us today to talk about this. Before we go on to the questions, I want to just introduce you a little bit. So you write that you've lived the best of both worlds because you were raised in Virginia. You were born and raised in Virginia, and then you moved to northern India during your middle school years. This shift allowed you to experience life in two different worlds, gaining valuable knowledge and strengths that has shaped you into the woman that you are today. And I think that is why maybe you have this appreciation for the story, because this Iraqi American story tries to bring and builds the best of both worlds, so that, oftentimes in our cultures, not so much as in the Indian culture, but in the Arab culture, the negative stereotypes are portrayed. But I really wanted to do the exact opposite in this. And this is not the only story that I have tried to do that, but I just felt it was so important, especially because it was about like women. But you've had been studying for a while, like you have, you're now attending Chapman University in California. And alongside your passion in acting, you are on the path to earn a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Creative Producing from Dodge Film School. And you've been studying with Scott David for a while, that you say that he is known, he is known for his work on The Day After Tomorrow, 2012, and Freshwater, and that he's been a great coach to you and a mentor as well. So again, thank you. And I'm going to go ahead and ask you the first question about, you write about Pomegranate that it's both relatable and at the same time fresh and unique. So how do you feel that how does it address those two components?
Right. So just going back in, like you said, there are Indian stories on the rise, and Asian stories are also coming up on the rise, but you don't see any really Middle Eastern representation, especially when it comes to Iranian. You don't see, or at least I can't remember seeing any representation of that in the media other than a negative stereotype. It's always just focused on the negative. So seeing this, I really relate to the character Niran. That's how you pronounce her name, right? Yes. So it's in that sense, I could really relate to myself, how she is, living the best of both worlds, hiding behind a camera because of her family, but at the end emerges into who she really is. But that refreshing element comes in also, one, because of the pomegranate reference. I thought that was just beautiful. The title was beautiful, and that in itself just brought a really refreshing element to it.
I appreciate you saying that that it felt relatable, because despite the different backgrounds, any woman, I think, has, or man, they have their own journeys, they have their own challenges. And so that's really what the story is about. It's not about them being good and bad, or bad versus good. It's really just that these are each person, the daughter, the mother, the brother, the father, the neighbors, Mary across the street, they all have their own challenges and their own journeys, and their own way of looking within in order to empower themselves. And I appreciate that you saw that, and then you felt that you can relate to Niran, because anybody can really relate to her. Any person that has a goal in life and has to go through certain barriers to get there, would be able to relate to them, because that's what an authentic story, I think, does. So rather than just us relying on what sells and writing stories to serve that genre, telling authentic stories, I think, can touch anybody's heart at any point. When I was 9 years old, the first novel I ever read was Gone with the Wind. So I read that in Arabic. I was in Jordan. We had left Iraq, and we were waiting our visa to come to the United States. I was 9 years old, and from that age, I really loved to read, but this was over 1,000 pages, and I still read it. And, as a young girl, I so related to Scarlett O'Hara's community, because it took place in the 1800s, and it resembled like ours, like, oh, they have all these gatherings and barbecues. And I was under the impression that the United States looked like that. I was in a big surprise, for when I came. But it didn't matter, though. Even the outside world was different. I just felt I was able to connect to Scarlett O'Hara, because the character just had so much heart, and she had so much uniqueness, and she was so much herself. So that's why authentic stories are important, and that when we do stories, it's important that they represent the communities that they should represent them, whether actors or writers and such.
And just going like back to that relatable thing, I see that with like Indian stories too. When I'm trying to relate to them, it's like I don't want to relate to them just because I'm Indian. I want to relate to them because it's relatable across all backgrounds. Niran's character is relatable across all backgrounds. It's not just, oh, this is just for Iranian Americans. Like, it's representing Iranian Americans, but almost, anyone can relate to it, which I think is beautiful.
Oh, thank you. So you compared this movie to India Sweets and Spices. So as we mentioned, talking about this authenticity situation. So while I grew up not seeing myself in stories and films or books, I was very influenced by other cultures, and such as Mira Nair's films. So she was very inspiring with Mississippi Mansala, Monsoon Wedding. And I just felt like, the stories would be so good. Like you said, it wasn't because it was an Indian story that I fell in love with it. It's because it was such a good story. And Monsoon Wedding, like I've watched it many times, because there was similarities, like the henna party. I found the henna party was just, I loved it, because we have those kind of henna parties, and the music, that she had, and everybody being so, in one hand, so traditional, but then everybody having their, having a phone, using their
Right.
technology. It's like we all have to use technology. We advance with technology, but not with certain traditions and stuff.
I know.
What similarities did you see in Pomegranate that Middle Easterners have, you think, like with Indians?
Honestly, I think even as Indians, a lot of us, we tend to shy away from what we really want to do. And I feel like that does relate to Middle Eastern children as well. They might not, for me, like, luckily, like I've had, like, my mom is very supportive of me, like as an aspiring actress. So I haven't had to shy away as much. But I know with like other kids, they're not able to connect with their parents as much. And that was seen in Pomegranate between Niran and Hasina. There was that barrier of, old traditions and like modern times. And I do see that with like, not just me, but like even my friends and like their grandparents, because is that barrier that comes in. And I think that's one thing that's very relatable between Indian families and Middle Eastern families.
Yeah, and over the course of my life, when you're saying this, I realize like I've had Indian friends and I've had Indian teachers, like mentors, and I hadn't thought about it, like, because I've had different teachers from different backgrounds, but I see that I think part of why they understood me and why we connected was because of those backgrounds, the family dynamics. In Monsoon Wedding, what I liked is that the story was similarly to how we often did things, especially before when people were able to visit Iraq. Now it's not as often that they go back and forth, but there was men would go and sometimes find brides in their old country because they felt like it was more traditional, it was more the thing to do. What I liked about Miranir is that she didn't do it in like a negative way. There was because not every matching, what do you call it? Like when you match up people, not every experience is negative. I mean, there's
Like
been
sort of like an arranged marriage.
Arranged marriage, right? There's
Right.
been a lot of very successful marriages. Sometimes
My parents,
even
my
right.
parents are arranged.
Yeah, and so there's so many successful stories, more so than even the love stories, right? But what I liked what she did is she made it so real, the challenge behind that, but then she did, she surprised me, like I was trying to see what the ending, and when I saw that, so I thought, wow, this is so similar to how we do things, like with the arranged marriage, how he feels, because the men have a challenge too when they're getting somebody that they don't really know from another country, and there's a certain type of expectations, and same thing with the woman, her expectation of how it will be in America. So I really enjoyed how she did that, and I think that's why that film, I watched it so many times, and I'm like, this is so relatable. People sometimes don't see what happens inside our homes because we can be conservative and private in that way, but then when we open, when we do let you in, you see like, oh, it's not how it looks from the outside. And that's why storytelling is so important. It gives us a chance to see others that maybe in a way that we might not be able to if we were not to go inside their homes.
Right. And a lot of us, I feel like, same with like Middle Eastern families and Indian families, like we come from, our home country to America, and we're looking for that independence that we want, and we work hard for that independence. We're like, we come from the ground, and like, we're going up, but we're working hard together to get there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for children, you were born here, yes. But so and you're very lucky to have had such supportive parents, but sometimes when you come here, if you're born in a different country and you come, it's a little bit more harder for the parents sometimes to accept, because they've had less time to adjust, and so the child is adjusting with them, and the child is seeing all these opportunities, but then inside their homes, they're being told that they have to stay a certain way. And then they go to school and they have to live a different way. And that can be very confusing and difficult, more than the parent can understand, because the parent ends up staying and they can control their little environment, whereas the child is seeing both, So I really think that the key is something which is very beautiful in what you did, which is, embrace the best of both worlds. I think that is just the answer, that you just see what your traditions have to offer and what the American life has to offer, and just embrace both, because really they're both part of us,
Exactly. Thank you.
So you wrote about Hasina, who's Niran's mother. She's everybody loves her. I gotta tell you, because we finished production recently, and so when I would be behind the monitor, and and as you read the locations, there wasn't that many locations, and actually the set was my house to make things easier. Well, this is how I was able to, like, for years I lived within the story. I could see where they're all gonna be, and that really saved us time and money. Just for anybody in film, okay, location.
I know, save money.
Yes, I from film school, I know you noticed that too when you wrote about the coverage. Honestly, anybody who's going to be an independent filmmaker, story is number one. That's really the number one thing. But keep in mind, when you're developing the story, the locations, because if you're going to be an independent filmmaker, that's where the costs really get higher, is that. So I limited it. I figured, okay, I already live in my house and they're gonna, obviously have a home. And then my brother lives across the street and his house is gonna have to be bombarded whether he likes it or not. So that's literally what we did. It was my house and my brother's house across the street. But I gotta tell you, we had so much fun. But when we were behind the monitor and we were on the set, there was quite a few scenes where Hasina, which was played by Zayn, I interviewed her a couple of weeks ago. She's hilarious. So she would add her little touch in here and there. And there was a couple of times where we just couldn't control ourselves and the scene was ruined by our laughter.
Oh no.
we tried hard, but she would just surprise us. She was such a natural. Actors that are that talented that they can bring, and she's never been to Iraq. She was born in Kuwait and she came when she was like a couple of years old to the United States. But I think when you're a talented actor, and if you really appreciate your culture, your background, you can really bring it forward. She was just like the neighbor, the mother, the aunt that drives us crazy, but we all love her. Like, we all love when she's around, but she drives us crazy.
She's the most traditional one too in the family.
Yes, she was so traditional. She was so funny. And you mentioned her in your report. I just, you mentioned the authenticity of the Arab American actors that are in there. And I was just curious, like, prior to reading this, I'm just curious about your exposure to these kind of stories. Had you seen stories that were not so stereotypical in literature and films? And if so, like, which were they? Because I'm asking this with a lot of sincerity, because it's like I'm on a search for finding these stories and even hoping to highlight them.
Right. And just like going back to how I mentioned Winnear, and she's Iranian American, but I can relate to her because I'm Indian, like coming from a different background. It's hard, like if I'm thinking back on authentic stories, I'm always looking for that story where it's the character's Indian, but I'm relating to them because their story is authentic. It's not like the stereotypical, oh, mom's always getting mad at the child for not studying or this and that. And I haven't really been able to see, I think there are definitely bits and pieces of authentic stories. Like even in the new Netflix show, Never Have I Ever, there are bits and pieces in that show where I can, there are like some comedic stereotypical elements that are in there, but there are like in certain episodes, there will be bits and pieces about authentic stories, especially in the second season. But especially when it comes to like Arab stories, I can't recall seeing any authentic story. That's why I think Pomegranate really hit so hard, because it was just so unique and refreshing. Like I remember Scott and we just wanted to keep reading more of it in class, and because I had never seen anything bring light to that community before.
And I gotta mention Scott again. So Scott David, when he contacted me about like trying to help find us some characters, he was so supportive. I gotta tell you, talking to people like Scott, it wasn't about just trying to work together. He really sincerely was so supportive. He wanted the best for this film, regardless of whether we work together. It was like, I really like the story. I see its significance and I want to help you if I can. And that meant the world to me. So like people like that, like they stay in your memory because when they recognize it, and the same thing happened with our executive producer, Scott Rosenthal, is that when he saw the story and he wanted to be executive producer, it was about the story. It wasn't about all these other elements. So for filmmakers today, especially I think minorities and women voices, this is really a time for you. If you have a story in your heart and you have the patience to do the work, because it is work. It's not just about somebody discovering you, as you probably know, Rabbani, right? I'm sure
Yes.
the report, I mean, where's the report? Because it's several pages. Was so impressive. Okay.
So much work. Gotta put it in.
I was impressed before I even read it, by the way. I scrolled down, and when I counted the pages, I'm like, this girl is awesome. This is something I would do. So before I even got to like read it, you already made an impression, not because it's just lengthy. I did scan and I saw that you're writing, you write very clearly. You were able to communicate your thoughts and feelings on paper. It was so organized. It was so well done. And so, believe it or not, that was that was the first impression. Before I even started reading the words, I was just kind of seeing that this is going to be an easy read because of the way, but it gave me a lot about a lot of background about who you are on a professional level. Because some people, even when we were doing casting, what I realized, they came unprepared, or they came not really understanding the character that they're trying to represent. And what requires you to be prepared is doing something thoroughly, going through the script the way you did. That gives me an impression about who you are. So I hadn't even seen you or anything like that, but it gave me a lot of impression, so that in the future, if somebody wants to cast you, or if I'm trying to make recommendation, I wouldn't hesitate, because I would feel that you would do your best. I don't know if you would get the part or you don't, or I don't know if it moves forward, but it gives me an impression. And so that sticks to people's minds, I mean, right? Like this is, so I saw that you did the work, and I was like, okay, you know what? I need to have her on. We need to have a conversation here. And we are here because of your excellent report.
And even Scott, he told me, because he knows like I'm, like piling on classes in college. Like I'm always that person that's like an overachiever. So he was like, I know you're busy, but he like, as I've written 2-3 other coverages for him. So he was like, if you have the time, like, if you want to write a coverage on Pomegranate. I didn't even think twice. I was like, yes, I will do it. In fact, it kept getting delayed. So I kept emailing him. I was like, if she reaches out, please tell her, like, I'm working on it. Trust me, I'm getting there. And I think it just came at the perfect timing too, because you said you were in that pre-production process, and it just reminded you of why you even started it all in the first place. So I knew I had to get it done and get it out to you.
I really appreciate that. See, like, yeah, so, there's this saying about like, if you want something to be done, ask a busy person.
And so I know that.
Like, I was so busy, but I found, I made the time, like, okay, I'll take on another thing.
No, I wanted to.
And I really appreciate it, because like I said, regardless of us sitting together today, which is also, of course, an added plus, but it did come to me at a time where it was very like challenging as I was putting everything together. And so there was many, many components and meanings to it. Thank you. So, I wanted to ask you too about the main character. She said, you say that her poetry, it does not abrupt at any point, and does not seem abrupt at any point, and always has purpose. So you're talking about Niran. So Niran, because I also wrote a book about this, and there's more poetry actually in there, but it's still, so her feelings, and you relate to Niran, and I obviously relate to Niran, because I too have this personality that, like, when I'm with my family, I'm one person, and I'm the youngest girl, the youngest child, almost. I have a brother that's younger than me, but everybody acts like my parent, and telling you what to do, and so you have to be in more of a defensive mode. Right. But inside of me, there's like this dialogue and this poetry and this writing that's going on, and all these stories that I'm formulating in my head, and so Niran does that. And in the book, I think you can kind of make these transitions more, and kind of bringing more feelings into it. I appreciated the fact that how you felt about the poetry in the script, that how it came off. And Niran is very influenced, as I am, by the poet Anadwana. And Anadwana is the first recorded writer in history. Before reading this script, had you ever heard of her?
No, so I had never heard of Anadwana. In fact, while reading the script, I think Scott and I did just like every time we come across like a character or word that we don't know when we're reading it, we'll do like a quick search. So we noticed that she is a poet, and I believe she is more of a like godlike figure, like goddess.
Yeah, she was a priestess and a princess, and she's
Right.
yes.
Right. So that was all that like I'd really known about her. And I think that really influenced. I was like, oh, this is why, it's so close to Niran.
Yes, because similarly to even how I felt when I discovered her, just from doing research, I was already an author and a journalist for years when I came across through research, and I'm like, what, this is the first recorded writer from ancient Iraq. How come I never heard of her? So imagine, I'm talking this not, maybe this was, let's say, about 10, 11 years ago or something like that. But still, that's a long time that I was an adult. And through my writing and stuff, and through all my associations with various Iraqi American communities and organizations, she was not brought up. And here I come across her, and I see that she played such an instrumental role. Now, prior to her, it wasn't that she's the first writer. It's not that she's the first that ever wrote. There were other scribes that wrote before her, but traditionally, people did not sign their names on the tablets when they wrote. So they would just leave it, and you don't know who the writer is. But in her case, she decided to sign her name. And she wrote, "It is I, Anadwana, who wrote this, something never done before." So she had this kind of a courage, and she used her poetry to bring peace between the two lands that her father, he was a king, King Sargon. So she used her poetry. It wasn't just a form of self-expression, which it was as well, but she also did it to bring peace between the two nations. So I was so influenced by what she tried to do, and her whole entire story. And then, so of course, Niran is influenced by her. But what Niran does is, part of the poetry comes from Anhadwana, but what she does is, through that influence, she creates her own poetry. And it's like Anhadwana, she's channeling Anhadwana, who helps her bring her voice forward. So, I really like that you said, I liked really what you said about that. You said that this film is needed. This is an independent project of passion that raises awareness and certainly holds breakout potential. Thank you so much, Rabana, for saying that. Rabbani, I'm sorry, I keep saying.
No worries.
Yes, it's okay. But when people are always telling me, is it Weem or we am? And I said, I've gotten so used to both. You can call me either now. Respond the same way. So what I would like to know now is, I know that you have so much talent, and you're very young, so I know you have a huge future. But I would like to see, or to hear what footprints you plan to put in the film industry as you move forward.
Honestly, and this is also coming from, reading your work in Pomegranate. Like, I myself want to bring that authenticity to life. There are stories that are yet to be told, and for me, it's just like I mentioned earlier, like there are a lot of kids that shy away, and especially in the Indian community, like their parents will either be like, no, like you have to follow that traditional career path. And there are a lot of hardships in this industry, and I know you're aware of them as well yourself. And it just, anytime someone asks me like, oh, like, why are you still going after it? Like, why are you still fighting for it? And it's like, because like if everyone backs down, then like, who is going to bring light to that story? Like, I'm going to keep fighting to break through in that industry. I want to break through in the entertainment industry as an actress, and I want to bring that representation, but not just, to multiple stories. Like Niran, it relates across all boards. Like the characters that I play, I want to try to relate to across as many boards as I can. And seeing something so beautifully written too from you, that also, like, because I'm always just picking up on like people and stories to inspire me, and this is definitely something that also like is going to stick with me for life and inspire me as I go on my journey. So thank you for that.
Well, let me tell you, just listening to you, I am so happy just to hear everything because it inspires me about the generation that's out there. I think we focus too much on negativity and the younger people this and that. And when we speaking to someone like you, I know that whoever is watching this or somebody, you're already touching people's hearts. So I thank you for that. And if there's anything that I can do along the way, I'd be happy to. Although I'm wondering, I mean, you might be some of the characters that played in the movie between the time that we signed them up and later, they were already like going, forward so quickly. So who knows, maybe I'll have to be knocking on your door, but good luck to you, Rabbani.
No,
We're so
thank
happy to
you.
have somebody like you in the film industry. We know that you are going to be also really making a big difference from like people who already have, but I think this is very contagious. And I think when you meet people like you that are doing similar things, you just get more energy from that. So we'll be watching out for your career, okay?
Thank you. No, I appreciate
Thank,
you so much for having me and all those kind words.
thank you for your time. Bye-bye, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Bye-bye.